right, guys, it's early, right? I was like, let me do a little video because I got a subject. You know, I talk about this subject often because it's my life experience, and I feel that it's relevant. But I just woke up. I'm in my massage chair. I got one of these zero gravity massage chairs off of Amazon. Whew, Lord, well worth it. Well worth it. Get this spine loose so I can start moving around for my day. But I was doing some research, and any time that I come up against some information in reference to, you know, because sometimes you have to use the racist terminology that this European-dominated society utilizes just so you can find certain research, right? So I put in Black natives, right? And all the information comes up is just so racist. And the rhetoric is racist. Like everything, it's ridiculous. So one article was talking about the nappy-headed Indians. Really? Okay. Another one was saying African natives. And I'm like, you know that you're reading sources from a psychopathic lunatic when you are going to put another country in front of the indigenous land that the people actually still live on. And it's interesting that nobody else with any sort of admixture gets removed from the land. Because you can go right here on YouTube and you can put in Native American DNA results, right? And you'll see where people come back with Mongolian ancestry, some ancestry from different Asian groups, some European ancestry. But they are never removed from the land, right? Because, you know, if you got any ancestry or perceived ancestry from Africa, oh, they packing your bags up. They packed up your whole entire generation to include your American indigenous ancestors and don't evicted everybody from the land. You got to go. As far as they concerned, you got to go. And it's just completely and utterly ridiculous. But if you have European admixture, which the great majority of us do have European admixture, whether it comes from France, whether it comes from Spain, whether it comes from Britain, right? The great majority of us do have European ancestry. But because our skin is not pale, you know, okay, as if the first Europeans weren't dark-skinned people, right? As if. Now, we know, the people of us that actually study ancient history, we know that the first people on this planet were all dark-skinned people, to include Europeans, right? So having European ancestry does not mean that your ancestry come from the latter occupants of Europe, which are the more paler Europeans, the more Aryan Europeans. So anyway, I noticed that nobody else gets removed from the land. It's just that if your skin presents with the beautiful melanin, it's like a hatred. It's honestly, it's like a hatred, and it's like a jealousy that's playing out here. Like I said, it's very narcissistic, their behaviors, but they always want to remove you from the land. Like, you can't occupy the land at all. You got to get out. If your skin is dark, you got to get out. But if you read, what was it George Washington's letter, the peopling of America, he went in and explained, like, they didn't like the Germans. They didn't like the Germans because the Germans were dark skin. They called them Boers. And they were talking about, well, how is the Germans going to take on our ways when they dark, right? So back in colonial times, the Germans that came here were dark-skinned people. And the Brits didn't like them. They hated them. So if you read that, you'll go on and they'll explain that the pale people are the minority of the planet. I'll repeat, the minority of the planet, right? This is the pale European speaking to his own people. And he said that the populations of the world are swarthy, which is dark, and tawny, which is dark. It's brown. You know, brown has different levels, because I ain't never seen nobody look like this chair. This chair is black, right? This chair is black. I ain't never seen, and you can see me, right? I haven't disappeared into this chair because this chair is black. So the earth has varying degrees of brown. You could look at a black cat and you could think that the cat is black, but as you move back the hair, you could actually see that the cat is brown. It only presents as black, right? And in human beings, we are not just one color. We have between 2 and 3 undertones. So anyway, everybody else that presents with this melanin somehow are aliens to, you know, America, the continent of America, and particularly in the United States, right? The United Colonies. Yet that theory does not apply to European immigrants. They just American. I'm American, right? It does not apply to them, right? They're not, in their brain, in their narcissistic brain, they're not a foreigner. They're not an immigrant. They have rights because they're American. And everybody else come from somewhere else and should return, except for them, right? So I say all that to say, when they feel the need to approach you with nonsensical racist rhetoric, tell them that they are getting their sources from another racist like them. So the source is null and void because it's from only one standpoint. And that standpoint is to always give you a history that does not exist in your indigenous land. It is another way used to deport indigenous people without physically removing them, because they can't physically remove them. Because if so-called African Americans were African, if so-called black natives were African, right? Pay attention to what I said, African. I'm not talking about admixtures, because they're not talking about admixtures. They simply say Africa and from slavery. Why haven't they rounded up everybody and deported them? They deport Mexicans. They deport Haitians. They deport Jamaicans. They rarely, if ever, deport Europeans. That's a whole nother subject for a whole nother day. Europeans are never talked about as being the immigration problem, when they are the largest group of immigrants in the United States. And they immigrate in by the millions yearly. But then going to tell you that you are the minority, which is, again, narcissistic ideology that so many people have believed, and they don't even examine the person who's telling them this information. It's like, am I going to listen to somebody when their entire story, they always frame it to be perfect? They're perfect. They're better. They outnumber you. You know, they're more intelligent. This. Just exactly like a narcissist ramping up their own ego, which none of it is actually true. Am I going to listen to these people to be a source of any information for me? Especially when their information is always told to belittle everybody else. Like, if you notice in the United States, when it comes to any type of communication about Africans, right? About so-called African descendants, about so-called African admixtures, it is always started with the story of slavery. Because apparently, you ain't had no other history aside from slavery, right? You ain't never did nothing, ain't never accomplished nothing but slavery. And even the story of slavery is not even told right. Okay, so you enslaved some people, you kidnapped them, you trafficked them, you held them, but they built your economy. They worked hard every day because they had no choice. So these people are not by any stretch of the imagination dumb, stupid, or lazy. It is actually the reverse. The people who are holding people in captivity are dumb, stupid, and lazy. And the only reason why slavery was able to happen as long as it did is because people of color do not go from 0 to 1,000 on the scale of narcissism and psychopathy, right? We have empathy. We have empathy. When you don't have empathy, you can do any and everything to a human being and feel no type of way. No type of way whatsoever. And then the whole fear thing, and of course religion, because once you get, it's the cult thing, once you get somebody's mind, their body will follow the mind. So if their mind say stay here, the body gonna stay. But yeah, it's like the entire rhetoric. But they don't talk about the first slavery. The first slavery was of the indigenous population. You don't go across the waters, pay money, or kidnap people, because money gonna be spent anyway, right? Travel costs money. When they are taking those boats out, they got to pay for the crew. They got to pay for food to survive however long, how many days, months, or whatever it takes for them to get from point A to point B. So money is being spent. They want us to believe. I'm not saying that they did not capture people from Africa. A lot of the capturing was done by other ships, right? Other ships that had people on board. They would, it was like the pirate stuff. They would capture the ship and its cargo and its crew and enslave the crew, right? And if those people on that ship was trafficking other human beings, of course, everything was looted, right? Everything was looted. What did they call it? They call it the booty, right? The bounty. So it's not told in the way of the first people that was enslaved were the indigenous population. Because if you are going in to take over, right, you're going to take over the people who's on the land. Because that's the only way that your plan is going to work. And we know this is true because we have the whole stories about how Christianity was introduced to us and our people. They were not subduing the mind with Christianity just for the sake of, spreading the gospel of the cult of Jesus. No, they were subduing the mind because they had every intention on utilizing the body and the land. So to skip over that history and just to say that slavery is all about African slavery is insanity. Then not to include European enslavement here in the U.S., which has been fantasized and dismissed up under the terminology indentured servitude, so much so that you will have people of color who say that they come from a background of slavery dismiss the enslavement of other people because they don't look like them. It was slavery. Europeans do not like the world to know that they were so cruel that they enslaved their own people. So they try to romanticize it and make it seem like, oh, it's okay. It was indentured servitude. These people agreed to be trafficked and kidnapped and to work hard like a dog. And some of them died while in captivity, right? So much so to where people are unempathetic to the plight of Europeans who were actually enslaved here in North America, right? And remember, these are the same narcissistic people telling the narrative, so you cannot listen to their narrative when they don't tell a story correctly, right? Enslavement happened with Native people, people from Europe, people from Asia, people from Southeast Asia. It happened to everybody here here in the United Colonies, the United States, right here, right here. All forms of enslavement happen to all forms of people. Just look at the old signs where they say they want no dogs. What they say, no dogs, no N-word, no spics, no Chinese, right? They want the people in the communities. Asians had to go to school with blacks, right? Because they had no standing. It was the same nonsense. There was no separation. If you were non-pale European, you were all lumped into the same a category of unworthiness to these pale people, right? So enslavement happened to a lot of people. They trafficked young European girls from various parts of Europe, labeled them tobacco wives because it was paid for with tobacco. And then they tried to make it seem like it was a glorious thing they were doing for the country. Those girls didn't want to come over here. They forced those girls to come over here and to have babies by old men from other European nations that wasn't even a part of their nation, right? To have babies, just to be utilized as a baby making machine, because the colonies was failing because these men was having babies by the indigenous women. They were not able to replicate themselves because no European woman in her right mind wanted to come to a strange country and suffer and struggle when she had family back home. She had a home to live in. She had a community to be a part of. Because they tried advertising, and no woman, no European woman took the bait because she had some sense. Then they started snatching young girls off the streets. There's evidence, there's documentaries about this. But I say all this to say, when you guys are doing research or listening to stories, you have to understand who's speaking to you. A psychopathic narcissist who frames everything that they do as not being that bad, as being everybody else's fault, right? Dismissing everybody to include their own people. So when somebody rambles off this rhetoric to you, oh, you ain't Native American, you African, ask them based upon what sources. Because you don't know me. I'm a complete and utter stranger to you. You don't know me. You don't know my family. But you feel so strong about what you said. So clearly, you've got this mindset based upon some sources. What are your sources? And did you research the person that wrote this book, that told you this information? What's their background? Who are they people? What are their political affiliations? What's their mindset? Are they racist? What's their belief systems when it comes to people of color? Because the further you dig, the more you're going to know that these are the people who come from the cult of Darwinism, the cult of paleness is better than everybody else. And then you can see it for what it is. Because remember, they stole our books that had our knowledge in it, that explained our stories. They rewrote our stuff. They had book burnings where they will burn our stuff. You know, our medicinal knowledge, they keep it for themselves, and then they repurpose it, and then they sell back the pharmaceutical drugs that mess you up. You know, maybe you have heart disease or something like that. And then they tell you the medicine is going to help you, but somehow that medicine is going to cause heart disease, eye twitching, or bloody stool, or whatever nonsense it gives you, right? Always pay attention to the sources. And and you know what's even more detrimental is the brainwashed people of color that is actually indigenous or may have admixture that includes many thousands of indigenous ancestors. They have taken on this Afro-Indigenous label, this Black Native label that separates them from their own land. There's absolutely no way you can feel a sense of belonging where you, out of all the indigenous populations, have to have a prefix in front of your identity. Do they have white native? Do they have Asian native? Do they have Siberian native? Now, I'm talking about all here in the U.S. I ain't talking about from Siberia and no, all here in the U.S. Do any other indigenous groups of people have to place a prefix before their indigenous identity? No, they do not. They do not. However, because the racism is so deeply rooted within the veins of the indigenous community and within the heart and soul of the government and the established of the United States, if you possess dark skin and beautiful curly hair, then suddenly you must place a prefix in front of your indigenous identity, as if you are indigenous by mistake. Indigenous because of slavery, because, there is no possible way that people from around the world could have traveled here to this continent before the Europeans, because the Europeans are so great. They are the only travelers in the world. They were the first to do everything. Remember, we're dealing with narcissists. They were the first to do absolutely everything. They was, boats was found from other places in the world, but nobody could actually have enough sense and common sense to put the boat on the water and actually make it anywhere. This is their whole narcissistic rhetoric. So to them, the only people that ever traveled here were Europeans. So no admixture didn't exist on this continent in their mind prior to their arrival. Right? Did everybody got to be African? First of all, we know that the terminology Africa is a Carthaginian Greek name. Okay? So I would say this to people who may be watching who identify themselves as Black Native or Afro-Indigenous. You are participating in the genocide of your own people. Nobody else has to put a prefix. This is not a denial of any of your ancestors, because these other people that call themselves Native, straight just Native, or straight just Native American, or straight just American and Indian, they have admixture. But they don't have to do prefixes, right? They can't. They don't have to present themselves with a disclaimer to being indigenous. They simply say, I'm Native American. And then if you happen to have a conversation with them in private, because a lot of them like to deny the admixture, then they'll let you know about their admixtures, right? But it does not, their foreign admixture does not come before their indigenous ancestors when they're still on their indigenous land. They don't say, oh, I'm Euro-Native, I'm Asian. They don't say that at all. But people of color have been so brainwashed into believing that they are less than, that they are not worthy. And then they wonder why they have these issues with these other races, natives. It's because you are playing their racist game. You keep identifying yourself as something that's removing you away from, that's making you feel like you less than, and you are going among these groups of people as being less than, instead of knowing the fact that you are just as indigenous as they are. And if we were going to use skin color and lookership as a determination of who is more native than the next, then the darker skin would be more historically accurate of the original first inhabitants of the entire planet. So your dark skin does not remove you from being indigenous, because you just retain the melanin of the ancients. All right, y'all. My massage is almost over. I am getting ready to get ready for my day. Peace.